We made it up to chapter 8, and last verse we read was 14. We're going to start at verse 15. Now, last week we studied about Moses and Aaron and the rod becoming a serpent, and I verified that it actually became a crocodile. Now, let's start reading here in verse 15. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth out unto the water. And lo, thou shalt stand by the river's brink, against he come. And the rod which was turned to serpent shalt thou take in thine hand. And thou shalt say unto him, The Lord God of the Hebrews hath sent me unto you, saying, Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldest not hear. Thus saith the Lord, In this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that are in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink the water. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That first picture we had on there was a crocodile god named Sobek. That's Sobek right there. And this is in a museum in Cairo. And you'll find that that the Egyptians worship many gods. They're almost like Hindu people. Anything that's creeping on the ground or crawling in the sea, they make it into a man god or a man or goddess. So I am not an expert on these the Egyptian knowledge, but I'm going to share some things with you. This was when the rod became a serpent. It was Nahash, which was a snake the first time, and the second time it was tame. So, but we see in verse 15 that Pharaoh is going to go down into the water, and there's an important thing about him going into the water. This particular act was an act of worship because they worshipped the Nile. The Nile was called the father. That's the picture I want right there. The father of life and the father of gods. Now this is Apis, A-P-I-S, the other one, the one that was right there, the bull god. The bull god is Apis, and here we have the water being turned into blood. Yeah, you just hit that button right there, one right next to it. There you go. There's my bull god, okay? Now, you know what? Most people that worship idols worship bull, you know? Think about it. Right? There he is, the bull god. But this is what Pharaoh would go down into the river, and he would worship his god every morning. So God told Moses and Aaron, go down there and meet him, because he's going to be down there worshiping his god. And we're going to show his gods how inferior they are. Here's his first god. Now this is go back one. We don't want to get to her yet. That's a bad one there. But the blood that was in the river. Okay, now, basically, he was warned. And one thing interesting about the Nile River, every 3 months, there's 3 months out of the year that start in June where they have the red tide. And the red tide comes in, the river actually does turn red. So this was not something that was odd necessarily to the Egyptian people to see the river turn red. But what was odd is that you couldn't drink it. And that the fish that were in the river died, and they stank, it says. And the water, they loathed to drink it, the water stank. I live by Lake Louisville. It stinks. If you live by the ocean, you get used to the smell, but it actually stinks because of rotting fish. Okay? Could you imagine? Yes. Go.
Stank worse than stink?
I think stank is worse than stink. I think it's a lot worse. Stank right is hard to get off. Yeah, you can't get stank off you. You know, that's good. I'm glad you shared that. That's okay. I wanted you to interrupt. Now, this brings us to this God. Let me see if I have any notes on him. I don't have any notes on Mr. Apis, do I? Thought I did. There it is. I have some notes on Mr. Apis, the bull god here. Let me read some things about him. He was worshipped in the Memphis region. he served as an intermediary between humans and the all-powerful god Osiris. And I think it's very interesting that the movement right now in the Syrian area of the world is ISIS,
Yes.
which is also a god of the Egyptians of the underworld. So then it says, according to Manetho, the worship was instituted. So we see. Apis is named on a very early monument, but little is known of the animal before the New Kingdom. Ceremonial burials of bulls indicate the ritual sacrifice was part of worship to the early cow deities. The bulls might represent a king and became a deity after death. His title was the renewal of life. But after death he became Osirapis, the Osiris Apis, just as dead animals were assimilated to Osiris, the king of the underworld. This Osirapis was identified with a Hellenistic Seraphis and may well be identical with him. Okay, now what I was getting at, though, is that they worshiped these gods, and these gods were important to them. We're going to find out as God tries to speak to the Egyptians. Remember, I told you, and God has told you, that the reason he was doing all these miracles was not because of the Hebrews. It was to reach the Egyptians.
That's right.
He'd already said he was going to deliver the Hebrews. That was a fact. But the fact is that these miracles were done because God hardened Pharaoh's heart, not Pharaoh. Okay? So you got to realize that. Okay, let me keep going here. Now, so let's continue on with verse 19. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes. Now, if you've ever smelled something like a rotting ocean, you know what they were up against. It says in verse 19, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, Take thy rod and stretch out thy hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon the streams, upon their rivers, upon their ponds, upon the pools of water, that they may become blood. And that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod. He smote the waters that were in the river, and in the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of the Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them, as the Lord had said." Now, let me keep going. "And the Pharaoh turned and went into his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the river. And 7 days were filled after the Lord had smitten the river." Okay, first of all, when the Lord turned the water into blood, what water was affected?
All of it.
Every bit of the water was affected. The rivers, the ponds, even to the various vessels they had that had water in them, they were contaminated. Now, one of the things that's very interesting, that I just can't imagine all the fish in Lake Louisville dying at the same time. That would be a very, very bad thing. You know.
I can't imagine not having any water to drink. Or
Not any water
to wash.
to drink.
Or
Just
to
blood. You could drink the blood.
clean.
And you could drink the blood, right? But that's not a very good thing. Especially when these people were religious people. They didn't believe in eating animals and drinking blood. Okay?
That's
That was
right.
against the law. That was just like the Hindus. Well, they had some animals they ate, but some of them were gods, and they ate them as gods. Like they would become the gods when they ate them. Okay? All kinds of stuff. You start studying Egyptian mythology, I call it mythology, or whatever you want to call it. It gets really, really wild, and I don't suggest reading it before you know all about the Bible. It's just better to know the Bible.
Brother George,
Amen.
I was thinking of all the people from Florida that up in those mountains, said, hey, they have no water, no food up in there. And the Americans are trying to put water and food to them.
Yes.
So that would be a terrible thing to be in a place, and hot as it is too.
Oh,
Their
yes.
heat is awful out of where.
Something happened in verse 22 that I was just imagining. I just thought this was just so crazy. Okay. Here he is. Okay. Moses and Aaron, God tells Moses to cause a plague, right? He's going to cause a miracle here, and the water's going to turn to blood. You can't drink any of it. It becomes undrinkable. Everything's dying. Everything stinks. And here you got the magicians and with their enchantments, and they go, hey, if you can cause a plague on us, we can too. You get that? If you can cause a plague on us, we can cause a plague on ourselves.
That's real wise.
How smart. How smart. But I found out that the one thing about it is every time these magicians were able to do one of these things, they were unable to undo it. You know? The devil plays tricks on himself a whole lot. You know? If you're gonna do that. Now this word magician here in verse 22 is chartam. I taught about it before, but some of you weren't here. It means a horoscopist or a magical line drawer. Someone who draws lines and calls up demons within those lines. And I'm sure you've probably seen some horror movie with that happening in it. But believe me that these things are not, these things are real. There are people out there that conjure up demons by drawing circles on the ground. And there's a lot of people that read their horoscopes every day. Anybody read their horoscope? I don't. You shouldn't. If you do, it's stupid, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's just stupid. I mean, you don't want to look to the heavens. It's just like they were talking about when all the moons turned to blood. They were talking about all things that's going to happen. You know what? Nothing happened. You shouldn't be looking to the heavens for signs and wonders.
No.
God is the one who brings signs and wonders. In fact, we learned last week the devil brings signs and wonders. So you have to be real careful about signs and wonders. And here we see them bringing on these incantations, and they brought forth this filthy blood, you know, from the little water that they could find. You know, they were able to turn it into blood. The magicians just kind of topped it all off. Okay, so Moses, and then they turn in all the vessels in the water, but they don't turn the water into blood that's in the ground. The Egyptians dig up the water in the ground; they turn it into blood, right? So now everything's blood. Now, in verse 23, it says that Pharaoh turned away and went to his house. The word pana means to turn away. He thought it was just a trick because his magicians just did it again. He thought it was a trick. But go figure. Yeah, Dake's, in my Dake's Bible, he said that's where the magicians got the waters they dug in the ground. Now, let me tell you something about a true thing. This water was turned to blood for 7 days. 7 days is the maximum time an individual can go without water. 1 week.
It's amazing how God does that.
If you're exposed to direct sunlight and heat, it's 3 to 4 days. So these people would go in, would have to go out of the sun. They had no water to drink, and everything stank. It was a very, very hard time. But of course, after 7 days, the Lord removed this plague. And that brings us to chapter 8. Chapter 8, it begins with verse 1, and this is the new lesson, lesson 4, if you're looking in your Sunday school books. It says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. And the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and in thy house, and thy servants, and upon the people, and in thine oven.